Okay, now it's time to take care of any dents. You can see that one little dent that we pointed out at the very beginning. And what I'm doing is I take a sanding block and I put 3M's 80 grit sandpaper on the sanding block, and then I go over all the areas that are flat so that it'll highlight anything that's like a dent. Like you can see how it's darker in that dented area. And then I'll take a pencil and I'll circle it so I don't forget about it later. And then I'll end up putting some body filler in there. But right now it's basically just going over the entire part. So just to make sure that I don't miss any little dings or dents or anything like that.
A little bit of waves in here is okay. Just because that's a body line. And this is a restoration, it's not a perfection. If it's somebody that wants it perfected for a show bike, then I always talk to them, ask if they want everything perfect. But since this is a restoration, it's supposed to be going back to the way it was from the factory. And that's how it was from the factory.
Now before I actually apply the body filler to the metal gas tank, I'll take this tool. It's made for shaping body filler, and it's kind of like a saw. And it's what it does is it puts in a really nice scratch pattern, probably like a 36 grit. And it just gives more tooth for the body filler to hold on to.
Okay, so now we have a good scratch pattern in the dents. Take my tack rag and make sure there's nothing on there, because we need the body filler to adhere to the metal. And you can see, got dust coming off, metal dust. Then I'll take my body filler. I'm using Evercoat Rage Gold and the catalyst, which is bentonite, no, what is this stuff? Benzoyl peroxide, very hazardous. They used to tell people to put these on zits. That's just stupid. Anyways, got this. Ooh, little drip, we don't want the liquid stuff. I put a line across it. And then I mix it thoroughly. And when I'm mixing it, I'm pulling it and pushing at the same time to work out any air bubbles. If I was just to stir this, I would add air bubbles, and then that would result in pinholes, and it would require even more work down the line. Do this until it's thoroughly mixed in and you don't see any streaks of the different colors. Take your paddle for the little ones. Make sure it's on there good. Give it a little bit of pressure so you can feel it go in there. These are so thin I might be able to get these done with just one, which would be nice. The one thing I forgot to mention when applying body filler, the surface temperature of the substrate needs to be 70 degrees Fahrenheit or more. That's whether that's metal, fiberglass, plastic, everything in this field has to be above 70 because that's how it's designed. If it's below that, you're going to have problems with curing and you're going to have to do something else. Okay, while this was drying up, I went ahead and mixed the primer surfacer. I like to use on metal a product from Viking Paints called Tanaco or something. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, so I mixed that up and that's now in the 30-minute induction period. So while that's doing its thing and getting all linked up, we'll start sanding with this. I'll start with a 40 grit. Again, I like the peel and stick. So with the 40, I'll get it down, the majority of it. And then where did I put my 80? Then I'll go grab the 80 grit. And I'll go over the top of that. So now what we have is an 80 grit sand scratch. And the dent is gone. Everything's flat, even surface, everything's the same grit. So then I just move on and go to the next one.
Okay, so the bodywork's done. I've waxed and grease remover, tacked everything off, and now it's time to spray the primer surfacer. This is the primer surfacer here, and then it's got a cure time of 3 to 5 days. I like to err on the side of caution and go 5 days. And then I'll work on the plastic.
Okay, so today's going to be plastic repair. Close inspection revealed there was a little bit of a crack right here. So to take care of that, typically I would V this out, put like aluminum foil, adhesive aluminum foil back here to hold everything in place, fill this, and then do the reverse. But this is so small, I'm just going to come at this from one angle. So for this, it's so small that I'm going to use my headgear with a Dremel. And at the end of the scratch, I'm going to go a little bit deeper because that's going to be where the crack ends. Now, if I was just to put filler over a crack without V'ing it out, it's just going to re-crack whatever's on top of it. You need to be able to get this extra material in. Next, I'm going to take the 180 grit. I'm going to go over this whole area, knock off any little pieces that might be sticking up, and give everything a good 180 grit, because that's what it says to do in the directions. Rigid part repair kit, which is what I'm going to be using, and in the directions it says, of course, soap and water, then the wax and grease remover, 180 grit abrasive. For the dust, do not solvent wipe, because then it's going to reactivate it again. So pretty simple instructions. And then these I've already sanded with the 180, so those are ready to go. I just have to blow the dust off. So this one I haven't yet. So this is what I had prepared before. This is where it had all those scratches. And each one, I'm just going to go over it. It does have the DP epoxy primer on here.
And on this I'll use the Evercoat's polyester glazing putty, which is for minor imperfections.
Okay. That's basically all of it. And then I'm going to mix up this product 1 to 1. 1 part A to 1 part B, pretty simple. And I'll do this on my mixing pad. To get different sized spreaders, you just take the main spreader and cut it down with a razor blade until you get the size that you want. I usually start with something thicker to mix everything, and then I go to the thinner ones to apply it. What else do you need to know? Oh, the stands that I use. Instead of purchasing stands from the store, this is what I do. I went to Mills Fleet Farm and looked around, and right here, right there you can see the base. That's some sort of blade used in farming. But basically it was round, it was metal, and it sat flat. So I purchased some of those, which were really inexpensive, and then I took some square stock of metal, and with that I welded that to the cutting disc, and then I took another thinner stock that would fit inside, drilled a hole here, welded on a nut so that I could just add a handle and tighten down. So then it's adjustable depending on what size I need. So you just loosen that, adjust it if you need it up higher, just lock it down that way. Very simple. And then on the very top, I weld just a simple piece, a small square, and that's good. Side covers, I never leave anything just like this. I always use Gorilla masking, or not masking tape, Gorilla duct tape on the underside, and I tape everything down because you just don't want to bump something and have it hit the ground, because then you have more work. But this size fits the side covers nicely, it fits the front fenders nicely, and if you have something that's wider, like a rear fender, you can just take a piece of wood, cut it to size, and then with 2 holes here, I just put a screw through it to hold it in place. So that's my whole stand makeup. Okay, so back to the job at hand. So we've got everything sanded. So now we blow it off with compressed air. And in the directions it says compressed air that's oil-less. That's because some people might be working with just a compressor and they don't have any filters from it. Well, can't do that. This is what I've got. I used the RTI Stealth, 2 different stages there, and then it goes through a desiccant, and then you got your regulator to adjust the air. So next, blow all the dust off. And then in the directions, it says to also wipe with a dry cloth. It does not say a tack rag. So again, let's do what the directions say. We'll only use dry cloth. And then I'm going to mix this up 1 to 1 and just
fill this crack, and for the rest of it I'll mix up the polyester glazing putty, which is the exact same as how you mix body filler. and then I'll fill the rest of the imperfections with that. Okay, so the paint booth is totally cleaned and the floor is wetted down so that there's no dust that will come up from the floor when I use my spray gun. And all the plastic parts are mounted on the stands. And I've got the Gorilla Tape holding them in place so I don't have to worry about bumping something and having it hit the floor. And then I'll mix up my K36 primer surfacer with K201 catalyst and reduce it with DT870. Put it in the gun and spray everything. And here it is, everything's been sprayed in the primer surfacer, and then this will get its cure time so that all the materials can shrink down. And remember, I did the tank earlier, so that's been curing while I've gotten all these parts prepped and ready to go.
Now that everything is in primer surfacer, I spray an alternate or a contrasting color on the parts so that when I sand it, I can see what still needs to be perfected. And there's either 3M makes a dry coat guide, or you can just use a cheap can of dollar lacquer paint to get your alternate color. Same as when I did the body work on the gas tank metal and I sanded it and you could see where I needed to fill. Same concept. So now that I'm ready to do that, I start by soaking the sandpaper in a bucket of water. And for wet sanding, I like to use P320 and P800. The P320 I use first just to knock it down quickly, go over all the parts like that, and then I'll go with the P800 to fine tune it. Next, I take a sanding block. It's flexible, but at the same time it's straight. So if you were just to sand with your fingers, you could get finger grooves, which is why we use a sanding block. So here I'll take the 320. I've let it soak until it's nice and flexible. That's the only point. Starting at the edge, I'll line it up, fold once, fold twice. And this is a little flap that I can hold it together with. So now I have 3 different surfaces I can use. Water's the lubricant. Again, this is the 320, so this is going to cut fast. Now you can see how the contrasting color or guide coat, what its purpose is. Because this is flat, anything that's not at the same surface is going to start to show. Now there's little things like these, where these are in very minor. Those are just the surface of the metal, how it comes from the factory. If the customer wants everything blocked out perfect, well then we would make sure that those are all blocked out perfect. Because this is a restoration, it's not. But this, however, is where there was some body filler. There was once a dent there. So that, remember the Xing out? Here I'm going to X out this area, knowing that as I go over it, I'm taking off material all around here, and the point is to hopefully erase this one. It's kind of like an eraser. Erase this area right here before I go through the metal here. Otherwise, I might have to add some more material. Now if I feel this, I can still feel a little bit of a bump just going over that. If it's not sanding quickly, that means all the grit is gone on the sandpaper. See how that last little bit was taking too long? So I'll just switch to a new side. Different grits are going to wear down at different times. You can't, it's not something you can time out. You just watch how it's going along and you'll start to know when it's time to switch to sandpaper. Okay, so that's gone. This is also why we put as many coats as needed depending on the work. This I put on 5 coats of primer surfacer with a little bit extra over any of the dent areas because I knew this was going to take a little bit of fine tuning. But sanding is really fun. I find it very enjoyable. Kind of like sculpting clay. It's along those lines, fine-tuning things. And you really can get it perfect. Okay, here, continuing on. Now remember, I'm doing this right now with a 320 grade, P320. I will be going over this with the P800. If I was to top coat this at 320, it's very possible that we'd be seeing sand scratches after everything's said and done. And we don't want that. We want this as beautiful as possible. And then for edges like this, I'll get up to it, but not overly, because if you go too much in like this, well then this little edge can put a groove in this direction, and we don't want that. So I'll just get it like that, and then I'll take a hand, like a little piece that's torn off, and normally I would wait till the very end to do this, but just to show you, I'll wrap it around this area, equal pressure, so that everything's removed. So putting some good tunes on and getting lost in sanding is wonderful. Just remember, as you're sanding, solvents are releasing fumes again. Those fumes are hazardous. Wearing gloves, wearing a respirator, and they even suggest to wear eye protection. Maybe some people get kind of crazy with flinging the water around, or maybe fumes get into the eyes. I'm not really sure why, but it's always good to go with what the manufacturer suggests because it's for your own safety, and as we all know, safety first.
So for these louvers on the side cover, I'll just use a free-floating piece of sandpaper to get in there as best as I can. And then after that, I'll go in with the gray scuff pad, the ultra-fine scuff pad. And so now I've gotten it pretty well done the first time. And I'll go over and I'll put the dry guide coat on again. And then I can, wipe off the excess, and then I can wet sand it again with the P800. And then, because the first time I did it with the P320, just to go fast. And then the second time with the P800 to fine tune. So the parts have been wet sanded, scuffed, cleaned with wax and grease remover, then taped onto the paint stands and tacked off. As for the paint booth, I wash the walls, wet down the floor, and get ready and suit up for time to finally spray. First I'll spray the primer sealer, which is the K36 that I used earlier on the plastic parts for a primer surfacer. But the primer sealer, it's a little bit thinner, and then it also has black added as a tint to make it a little bit darker. And the sealer's purpose is for color holdout, to prevent staining, and so that you have better adhesion. And then I put on the black base coat, because this is a base coat, clear coat finish. And then once the base coat has had time to flash off, then I re-wet the floor. If there's any dry spots, re-tack off the parts and apply the clear coat. And for this clear coat, I know I'm going to be wet sanding it, so I'll give it a little bit extra. Typically it's 2 to 3 coats. I go 3 to 4 if I'm going to be wet sanding it.